The rain hammered against Elena Carter's windshield as she navigated the winding mountain road, each turn revealing another glimpse of the massive concrete wall that had haunted her childhood nightmares. The Riverside Dam loomed ahead like a tombstone, marking the death of her uncle's dreams. And now, somehow, it was hers. Her 9-year-old daughter, Sophie, pressed her nose against the back window, eyes wide as they approached the structure. "Mom, it's huge. Like a castle for giants." Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel of her ancient Toyota. A castle. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. More like a prison sentence. When the lawyer's letter arrived 3 weeks ago, she'd thought it was a mistake. Uncle James had died alone in a nursing home, leaving behind nothing but debts and this crumbling monument to a failed hydroelectric project from the 1996. More like a death trap, Elena muttered, echoing the words of every person she'd told about the inheritance. The county inspector, the real estate agent she'd consulted, even the clerk at the courthouse where she'd signed the deed. They'd all said the same thing: condemn it, tear it down, walk away. But Elena Carter didn't have the luxury of walking away. She had 847 in her checking account, a daughter who needed asthma medication she could barely afford, and rent due in 2 weeks on an apartment, with black mold growing behind the bathroom tiles. When the inspection report listed the dam's demolition value at 15,000, enough for the concrete salvage alone, she'd made her decision. $15,000 meant breathing room. It meant 3 months of rent. It meant Sophie's medicine, and maybe, just maybe, a decent used car that didn't sound like it was dying every time she started the engine. The access road deteriorated as they climbed higher, potholes filled with rainwater that splashed against the undercarriage. Elena winced at each impact, praying nothing important would break loose. They couldn't afford car repairs any more than they could afford anything else. The dam rose before them, 8 stories of weathered concrete, streaked with rust and vegetation. A chain-link fence surrounded the facility, posted with warning signs that had faded to near illegibility. Danger. No trespassing. Structural failure risk. Elena parked near the fence and killed the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the rain drum on the roof, gathering the courage to actually go inside. "Are we really going in there?" Sophie's voice was small, uncertain. Elena turned to look at her daughter. Sophie had her father's dark eyes, the same eyes that had looked at Elena with such promise before he'd decided that a family wasn't what he wanted after all. That had been 4 years ago. 4 years of doing it alone, of double shifts as a nursing assistant, of checking price tags twice, and putting items back because they cost too much. "Yeah, baby. We need to see what we're dealing with." They climbed out into the rain, Elena pulling, her thin jacket tighter against the cold. The lock on the gate was rusted, but still functional. She fumbled with the key the lawyer had given her, hands shaking from more than just the chill. The gate swung open with a groan that sounded almost human. Beyond lay a small parking area, cracked and overgrown, and the main entrance to the dam's control building. More warning signs, more rust, more evidence that this place had been abandoned long before her uncle's death. "Stay close to me," Elena instructed, taking Sophie's hand. The control building door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of mildew and decay was overwhelming. Water had clearly been getting in for years, pooling in corners and fostering colonies of mold. The reception area was still furnished with a desk and filing cabinets from another era, papers scattered across surfaces like leaves. Sophie coughed, her breathing already labored. Elena cursed herself for bringing her daughter into this toxic environment. "Hold on, baby. Let me find a window." She crossed to a wall of windows overlooking the dam's reservoir side. Most were cracked or broken entirely, but she managed to force one open, letting fresh air flood in. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and through the mist, Elena could see the reservoir spread out before them, acres of dark water held back by the concrete barrier. "There's more inside," Sophie said, pointing to a doorway that led deeper into the structure. Elena hesitated. The inspection report had mentioned the generator room, the turbine hall, various mechanical spaces that made up the dam's operational areas. All condemned, all dangerous, but also all filled with copper wiring, steel components, anything that could be sold for scrap. She'd brought a flashlight, and now she clicked it on, the beam cutting through the gloom. "Okay. But we're careful, very careful." They moved through the control building, Elena testing each step before putting her full weight down. The floor seemed solid, enough, but she wasn't taking chances. They passed offices frozen in time, calendars still showing dates from Tizian's Givinjigent Ojum, coffee mugs, growing exotic species of fungus. "Why did Uncle James keep this place?" Sophie asked. Elena had wondered the same thing. The dam had never been operational during her lifetime. Some kind of engineering flaw discovered during final testing had prevented it from ever generating power. The project had bankrupted the small company that built it, and it had sat abandoned ever since, passing through various hands until it somehow ended up with her uncle. He was a stubborn man, Elena said, which was the politest way to describe James Carter. Thought he could fix it, make it work. Spent his whole life trying. A stairwell led downward into the heart of the structure. The concrete walls here were slick with moisture, and somewhere below, water was dripping in a steady rhythm. Elena's flashlight beam revealed stairs descending into darkness, each step coated in a slippery film. "Mom, I don't think we should go down there," Elena agreed. This was foolish, dangerous. They should turn around, call the demolition company, take their 15, and never look back. But something pulled at her. Maybe it was the desperation of their situation, or maybe it was curiosity about what Uncle James had been so obsessed with. Either way, she found herself descending, Sophie reluctantly following. The generator room was massive. Cathedral ceilings stretched overhead, supported by concrete pillars that seemed to grow from the floor. 3 enormous turbine housings dominated the space, each one 20 feet tall, their metal casings covered in decades of rust and grime. Elena swept her flashlight across the room, taking in the scale of it. Catwalks ran along the walls at various heights. Control panels lined one side, their gauges and switches long dead. Pipes and conduits ran everywhere, like veins in a body. "It's like a dinosaur," Sophie whispered, her voice echoing in the vast space. Elena nodded. A dinosaur, yes. A relic of an industrial age that had moved on, leaving this concrete corpse behind. She was about to suggest they head back up when her flashlight caught something unusual. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden behind one of the turbine housings, was a section of wall that didn't match the rest. The concrete was newer, cleaner, and set back slightly from the surrounding surface. Elena crossed the room carefully, stepping over abandoned tools and debris. As she got closer, she could see that this wasn't just discolored concrete. It was a sealed doorway, deliberately filled in, but not perfectly integrated with the original construction. "What is it?" Sophie asked, moving closer. Elena ran her hand over the surface. "Someone blocked this off after the dam was built." Her mind raced. Why would anyone seal a doorway inside an abandoned dam? What could possibly be behind there that needed to be hidden? She thought about the inspection report, the blueprints she'd been given. None of them had shown any sealed passages or hidden rooms. This was something else, something not on any official record. The demolition company. They'd be here in a week to start tearing the place down. Whatever was behind this wall would be discovered then. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Or, destroyed. Or, Elena made a decision that would change everything. We need to see what's behind there. The hardware store owner looked at Elena like she'd lost her mind when she asked about demolition equipment. You're planning to break into a wall? In that condemned dam? Elena forced a smile. Just need to do some salvage work before the demo company arrives. Copper wiring, that sort of thing. He remained skeptical but eventually rented her a sledgehammer and a pry bar. You be careful in there. That place has been one bad storm away from collapsing for 20 years. With Sophie at school the next day, Elena returned to the dam alone. She'd borrowed money she didn't have for the tool rental, adding it to the growing pile of debts that kept her awake at night. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the sealed doorway was important. The generator room seemed even more ominous in daylight, though precious little light penetrated this deep into the structure. Elena set up battery-powered work lights, illuminating the sealed section of wall. She started at what she estimated was the edge of the original doorway, swinging the sledgehammer with all her strength. The impact sent shocks up her arms, and chunks of concrete fell away. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off every surface. It took 3 hours of brutal, exhausting work before she'd created a hole large enough to see through. Elena shone her flashlight into the gap, heart pounding with exertion and anticipation. Beyond was another room, smaller than the generator hall, but still substantial. And it wasn't empty. Elena's breath caught in her throat as her flashlight beam revealed what looked like metal crates, dozens of them, stacked along the walls. She widened the hole enough to squeeze through, ignoring the rational voice in her head that screamed, this was dangerous, foolish, insane. The room beyond the sealed door was cool and dry, remarkably well preserved compared to the deteriorating generator hall. Elena crossed to the nearest crate, brushing away dust to reveal stenciled markings. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Property of FDIC. 1963. Her hands trembled as she worked the latches on the crate. They were stiff with age, but still functional. The lid opened with a metallic groan. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and plastic, were bars of gold. Small ones, each about the size of a paperback book, stamped with numbers and seals. Elena lifted one, surprised by its weight, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. She opened another crate. More gold. A third. The same. Her legs gave out, and she sat hard on the concrete floor, still holding that single bar of gold, staring at the rows of crates that filled the room. Her flashlight beam caught serial numbers, official-looking stamps, and on one crate, a partial document, visible through cracked plastic. Emergency Federal Reserve Transfer. Cuban Missile Crisis. Classified. Elena's mind spun. 1963. The Cuban Missile Crisis. She vaguely remembered learning about it in school. The world on the brink of nuclear war. And someone had hidden gold here, in an unfinished dam in the middle of nowhere. She forced herself to stand, to look more carefully at the crates. There were at least 60 of them visible, maybe more stacked behind, if each contained even a fraction of what the first ones held. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Sophie's school. Ms. Carter? Sophie's having breathing difficulties. We need you to pick her up. Reality crashed back. Elena carefully placed the gold bar back in its crate, closed the lid, and squeezed back through the hole in the wall. She practically ran to her car, mind racing faster than her feet. Sophie. Medicine. Bills. And now, somehow, impossibly, gold. Millions in gold hidden in a condemned dam that was scheduled for demolition in less than a week. Sophie was okay. Just another asthma flare-up, triggered by the changing weather. Elena held her daughter in the school nurse's office, feeling the familiar helpless anger at their situation. If they had better housing, if they could afford the preventive medications, if. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Elena sat at her kitchen table with her laptop. She searched for information about gold reserves, about the Cuban Missile Crisis, about anything that might explain what she'd found. The more she read, the more the pieces fit together. During the height of the Cold War, the federal government had dispersed gold reserves to secret locations across the country. Protection against a nuclear attack on Fort Knox. Small facilities, off the books, often hidden in plain sight, or hidden in an unfinished dam in rural Pennsylvania. Elena found articles about similar discoveries over the years. A farmer in Kentucky who'd uncovered a sealed bunker on his property containing millions in silver certificates. A renovation project in Washington that revealed a forgotten treasury vault. But those discoveries had been immediately seized by the government. The finders had received nothing, or at best, a tiny percentage. Legal battles that dragged on for years, ending with federal agencies reclaiming what they insisted was always their property. Elena leaned back in her chair, staring at the water-stained ceiling of their apartment. She could report the discovery, do the right thing, the legal thing, and watch as the government took it all, leaving her with nothing but thanks and maybe a token reward. Or she could stay quiet. The dam was scheduled for demolition. The discovery would happen anyway, just later, after the structure came down, and by then, her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Carter. The voice was male, professional, with an edge of urgency. My name is Marcus Webb. I work for a private asset recovery firm. I understand you've recently inherited the Riverside Dam property. Elena's blood ran cold. How did you get this number? That's not important. What is important is that we're prepared to make you a very generous offer for that property. $500,000. Cash. You can walk away tomorrow. Never think about it again. $500,000. Life-changing money. Everything she'd ever needed. And more. Why? Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. A pause. The property has historical significance. My clients are interested in preservation. Your clients know what's inside. Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Carter, the offer is generous, but time-sensitive. The demolition is scheduled to begin in 6 days. If you accept, we can have this wrapped up by tomorrow morning. And if I don't? The voice on the other end lost its professional veneer. Then you're making things complicated for everyone involved. Take the money, Ms. Carter. It's the smart play. Elena hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped the phone. They knew. Somehow, they knew about the gold. And they wanted her out of the way before the demolition revealed it to the world. She thought about that sealed doorway. The deliberate concealment. This wasn't just abandoned federal property. This was something people had worked hard to keep hidden. And now she'd found it. Elena made a decision. Tomorrow, before the demolition company arrived, before Marcus Webb and his clients could make another move, she was going to document everything, photograph every crate, every marking, every piece of evidence, and then she was going public. But first, she needed help. Daniel Ross had been Elena's neighbor for 2 years. Retired military, he lived alone in the apartment next door and occasionally helped Elena when her car wouldn't start or when she needed someone to watch Sophie in an emergency. He was quiet, reliable, and most importantly, someone she trusted. She knocked on his door at 6 a.m. Daniel answered in worn jeans and a t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. He took one look at Elena's face and stepped aside. Come in. She told him everything. The inheritance, the sealed room, the gold, the phone call. He listened without interrupting. his expression never changing from calm attention. When she finished, he set down his coffee mug. "Show me." They left Sophie with Mrs. Kim from downstairs, a grandmother who doted on her. At the dam, Elena led Daniel through the control building and down into the generator room. She'd brought more work lights this time, and the sealed doorway stood out starkly in their illumination. Daniel examined the hole she'd made, the crates beyond, his movements methodical, professional. He opened several crates, checked markings, took photos with his phone. "This is the real thing," he said finally. "Federal Reserve gold. I saw similar bars when I was stationed at Fort Knox for a security detail. What do I do?" Elena's voice cracked with the weight of the question. Daniel closed the crate he'd been examining. "Legally, you report it. The government claims it. Maybe gives you a finder's fee. You get maybe 1% if you're lucky. And illegally?" He met her eyes. "There's no illegal option here, Elena. This is federal property. Always has been. The fact that it was lost doesn't change ownership." Elena felt tears burning. "I can't afford Sophie's medication. We're about to be evicted. And there's millions sitting right here." "I know." Daniel's voice was gentle. "But stealing federal gold is a good way to spend the rest of your life in prison." "Then what do I do?" Elena whispered. Daniel considered. "You use what you know as leverage. You don't just report the discovery. You control the narrative. You document everything. You contact media outlets. You make sure the whole world knows what you found, before the government can classify it or seal the records. You force transparency. And that helps me how? Public pressure. When the feds try to lowball you with a token finder's fee, you have millions of people watching. You have leverage to negotiate a proper reward. It's not illegal, and it's your only real chance at coming out of this with anything." Elena looked at the sealed doorway, the hidden room beyond, the gold that represented everything she needed and couldn't have. "Okay, let's document everything." They spent the next 6 hours photographing every crate, every marking, the room itself from multiple angles. Daniel used his phone to film a complete walkthrough, narrating what they were seeing. Elena took notes, documenting serial numbers and any text visible on the crates or the oilcloth wrappings. By the time they finished, they had hundreds of photos and videos, undeniable proof of what lay hidden in the condemned dam. "Now we need to get this in front of journalists before the demolition starts," Daniel said. "Once the media has it, the government can't suppress the discovery." Elena nodded, exhaustion making her movements slow, but as they prepared to leave, she heard something, footsteps above them, in the control building. Daniel's expression hardened. He put a finger to his lips, then moved silently toward the stairwell. Elena followed, heart pounding. 3 men in dark clothing were going through the control building offices, clearly searching for something or someone. Daniel pulled Elena back into the shadows of the stairwell, the back entrance. Now, quietly. They retreated into the generator room, moving carefully toward a service tunnel Daniel had spotted during their documentation. The tunnel was narrow and flooded with several inches of water, but it led to an emergency exit on the downstream side of the dam. Behind them, they heard voices echoing in the stairwell. The searchers were coming down. Elena and Daniel ran. They made it to Daniel's truck, parked a quarter-mile from the main entrance. As they drove away, Elena saw 2 black SUVs at the dam's gate. "Marcus Webb's clients," she said. Daniel nodded grimly. "Which means we need to move fast. They'll figure out we were there, and they'll know we documented the gold." They went directly to a local news station. The investigative reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa Torres, listened to their story with growing excitement. When Elena showed her the photos and videos, Torres was on her phone immediately, calling her station manager. "This is national news," Torres said, her words rapid fire with adrenaline. Hell, this is international news. Missing federal gold reserves from the Cold War, found in a condemned dam. I need to get a crew out there immediately. The demolition is scheduled for tomorrow, Elena said. And there are people who want to keep this quiet. Torres's expression hardened with the determined look of a journalist who'd found a major story. Then we go live tonight, before anyone can stop us. The next 6 hours were a blur. Torres's crew set up outside the dam. Elena and Daniel gave on-camera interviews, and by evening, the story was breaking on local news channels. By night, it had gone national. Elena sat in Daniel's apartment with Sophie, watching their story spread across cable news. Her face was everywhere, the single mother who discovered hidden federal gold. The dam's exterior was shown from every angle. Experts were brought in to speculate about the Cold War dispersal program, and the federal response was immediate. FBI agents arrived at the dam before midnight, cordoning off the entire area. The U.S. Treasury Department issued a statement confirming that the gold was federal property and thanking the citizen who discovered it. The demolition was indefinitely postponed. What happens now? Sophie asked, curled against Elena on the couch. Elena honestly didn't know. The next 3 weeks were a legal maze. Federal lawyers, claims processors, media interviews. And through it all, Marcus Webb's mysterious clients stayed frustratingly invisible. The gold was removed from the dam under heavy guard. Official counts revealed 287 crates containing gold bars valued at approximately 298 million. The discovery made international headlines, spawned conspiracy theories, and prompted a congressional investigation into lost federal assets. Through Daniel's connections and Torres's media presence, Elena was able to secure legal representation from a law firm that specialized in finder's fee cases. The battle was long and complex, with the government initially offering Pinkset 0, less than 0.2% of the fine's value. But public opinion was firmly on Elena's side, a single mother struggling to afford her daughter's medication, who'd done the right thing and reported the discovery instead of keeping quiet. It was a story that resonated, and the pressure mounted. 6 months after breaking through that sealed doorway, Elena received the settlement. 14,9 million. 5% of the gold's value, the largest finder's fee in federal history. Elena stood in the generator room one final time. The sealed doorway was gone now, demolished to allow the removal of the gold. The entire facility was set to be torn down next month, the dam itself to be breached, and the reservoir drained. An ending, finally, to her uncle's failed dream. Sophie stood beside her, no longer wheezing or struggling for breath. New medication, a new apartment with clean air and no mold, a future that seemed suddenly full of possibilities. "Did you ever figure out who sealed up the gold?" Sophie asked. Elena shook her head. The federal investigation had concluded that it was part of the original Cold War program, sealed by Army Corps engineers in 1963, and simply forgotten in bureaucratic chaos when the dam project failed. Her uncle had probably never known it was there. But sometimes, late at night, Elena wondered if Uncle James had known, if that was why he'd held onto this worthless property for decades, why he'd left it to her specifically. Maybe he'd found the sealed door, but lacked the strength or courage to break through. Maybe his inheritance had been one final chance for her to change her life. "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. He'd been invited to this final visit, his help in documenting the discovery never forgotten. Elena smiled. "First, I'm starting a foundation for single mothers who need help with medical expenses for their kids. Then I'm going back to school, maybe nursing, maybe something else. And we're going to travel, Sophie and me, see the world beyond Pennsylvania. Sophie grinned. And we're getting a dog. And we're getting a dog, Elena agreed, laughing, as they walked out of the dam for the last time. Elena paused at the entrance to look back. That moment of deciding to swing the sledgehammer, to break through the wall, to trust her instinct that something important lay hidden. It had changed everything. Sometimes, the biggest treasures were hidden in the most unlikely places. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was take a chance on something everyone else said was worthless. The dam had been condemned, dismissed, forgotten, just like Elena had often felt in her years of struggle. But both of them, it turned out, had held unexpected value. You just had to be willing to look deeper than the crumbling surface. As they drove away, Sophie looked back at the massive concrete structure. "Mom, do you think there are more secrets hidden out there, in other forgotten places?" Elena considered the question. The federal investigation had revealed that dozens of Cold War dispersal sites remained unaccounted for, their locations lost to bureaucratic chaos and the passage of time. Some had probably been demolished already, their contents destroyed unknowingly. Others might still be waiting, sealed away in unlikely locations. "Maybe," she said, "but those are someone else's discoveries to make." She had her miracle. She had her treasure. And most importantly, she had proven that being dismissed and overlooked didn't mean being without value. Sometimes, it just meant people hadn't looked close enough. The condemned dam disappeared in her rearview mirror, but its lesson remained. When everyone tells you something is worthless, when every expert says to walk away, when conventional wisdom screams that you're wasting your time, sometimes, just sometimes, they're all wrong. And sometimes, the thing everyone wants to tear down is exactly what needs to be explored. 3 years later, the Riverside Dam was completely gone. The valley returned to nature, the river flowing freely. A small plaque marked where it had stood. Site of the 1963 Federal Gold Reserve discovery. Elena Carter, former nursing assistant and single mother, now ran 3 medical assistance foundations across Pennsylvania. Sophie, healthy and thriving, was collecting stories from other families helped by her mother's work. And in Elena's office, framed on the wall beside her degree, was a single photograph, the sealed doorway in the generator room, her sledgehammer resting against it, taken the moment before she'd started breaking through. A reminder that the most important decisions often look like the craziest ones. That sometimes you have to ignore everyone's advice and trust your gut. That condemned doesn't mean worthless, and abandoned doesn't mean empty. The world was full of sealed doorways, she'd learned, hidden opportunities that everyone walked past because they looked too old, too damaged, too difficult to bother with. But for those brave enough or desperate enough to take that first swing of the hammer, sometimes, impossibly, there was gold on the other side. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 8 months after the settlement check had cleared. Elena was in her new office, reviewing grant applications for the foundation, when an unfamiliar number flashed on her screen. "Ms. Carter, this is Agent Rachel Dominic with the Treasury Department's Historical Asset Recovery Division." Elena's stomach tightened. She'd thought all the federal involvement was finished. "Is there a problem with the settlement?" "No, nothing like that. Actually, I'm calling because we need your help." Agent Dominic's voice carried an urgency that made Elena sit straighter. "The Riverside Dam discovery has led to something unexpected. We've identified 17 other potential Cold War dispersal sites across the country. Problem is, most of them are on private property, and the owners aren't exactly cooperative once they learn federal agents want to search their land." Elena frowned, unsure where this was going. "I don't understand how I can help." "You have credibility, Miss Carter. You found the largest Cold War reserve cache in history. and you handled it by the book. Property owners trust you in a way they'll never trust us. We'd like to hire you as a civilian consultant. You'd visit these sites, assess them, and if you find evidence of sealed facilities, you'd document it just like you did with the dam, and get shot at by suspicious landowners who think the government is trying to steal their property. Agent Dominic laughed, though it sounded forced. We'd provide security, of course, and compensation, 50,000 per site visit, plus 10% of any discovery's value. Some of these caches could make Riverside look small. Elena's mind raced. 50,000 per visit meant serious money, even if most sites turned out empty. And 10% of a major discovery could be life-changing for the Foundation's work. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. But Ms. Carter, time is a factor. Some of these sites are scheduled for development or demolition. If we don't move fast, we lose them forever. After hanging up, Elena sat in silence, staring at the framed photo of the sealed doorway. She'd promised herself she was done with treasure hunting, done with danger and federal investigations. She had Sophie to think about, a foundation to run, a normal life to live. But the thought of other discoveries being lost forever, of answers to Cold War mysteries buried under shopping malls and subdivisions, gnawed at her. And if she was honest, part of her missed the thrill of that moment, when the sledgehammer broke through, when the impossible became real. She called Daniel. They want you to become a professional treasure hunter, he said, after she explained the offer. For the federal government. Is that crazy? Completely. She could hear the smile in his voice. But when has that stopped you? What does Sophie think? Elena hadn't told her daughter yet. Sophie was finally settled in a good school, making friends, thriving in ways that would have been impossible before. Dragging her across the country to inspect abandoned Cold War sites seemed unfair. She'd probably love it, Elena admitted. You know how she is about adventures. Then, what's really holding you back? Elena looked at the grant applications spread across her desk. People depending on her foundation. Families who needed help just like she once had. Responsibility. I've built something here. People are counting on me. The foundation can run without you for a few weeks at a time. That's what staff is for. And think about it, Elena. If you find another cache, even half the size of Riverside, that's funding for the foundation for decades. You could help thousands more families. He was right, of course. Daniel usually was. There's something else, Elena said quietly. What if the next site isn't empty? What if there are people like Marcus Webb willing to hurt us to protect their secrets? I can't put Sophie in that kind of danger again. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then I'll come with you. Extra security. I've got nothing but time these days, and honestly, retirement's boring as hell. Elena laughed despite herself. You're insane, says the woman who bought a condemned dam and found 300 million in gold. When do we leave? The first site was in Montana, a former Strategic Air Command facility that had been decommissioned in 1968 and sold to a rancher named Harold Sykes. Agent Dominic's briefing was thorough. The facility had housed radar equipment and communications arrays, but classified documents suggested it might have also served as a dispersal site for precious metals. Harold Sykes was 73, weathered as the Montana landscape, and deeply suspicious of anyone from the government. When Elena, Sophie, and Daniel arrived at his ranch, he met them on his porch with a rifle across his knees. Mr. Sykes, I'm Elena Carter. We spoke on the phone. I know who you were late. Saw you on the news, finding that gold in Pennsylvania. That's why I agreed to this meeting, instead of telling the feds to get off my land. He studied her with sharp eyes. But I want to be clear. This is my property, bought and paid for. Anything on it belongs to me. Elena nodded, having anticipated this. "Mr. Sykes, if we find anything, you'll get the same deal I got. 5% finder's fee. Minimum. That's guaranteed in writing by the Treasury Department." 5%, he snorted. "Highway robbery. It's better than 0, which is what you'll get if you refuse, and they eventually get a warrant," Daniel said mildly. Sykes's eyes shifted to Daniel, assessing. Military bearing was hard to hide, and Daniel had it in abundance. "You Army?" "Marines. 30 years. Something in Sykes's posture softened slightly. "Navy myself. Submarines. Spent the Cuban Missile Crisis underwater, waiting for orders that thankfully never came." He stood, leaning the rifle against the wall. "All right. I'll show you the old facility. But the girl stays here. Not safe. Down there." Sophie, who'd been quietly observing from behind Elena, stepped forward. "I've been in a condemned dam that almost fell on us. I think I can handle your bunker." Sykes barked a laugh. "She's got spine. Reminds me of my daughter." He looked at Elena. "Fine. But everyone signs a waiver. I'm not getting sued when somebody breaks their neck." The facility entrance was hidden in what appeared to be a collapsed hay barn. Beneath rotting boards and rusted equipment, a concrete hatch remained surprisingly intact. Sykes produced a key ring with keys that looked older than Elena. "Haven't been down there in 5 years, he said, as he worked the lock. "Used to store equipment, but the moisture was ruining everything. Sealed it up. Figured I was done with it." The hatch opened to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. Elena clicked on her flashlight and started down, Daniel following with Sophie between them. Sykes came last, his movements surprisingly nimble for his age. The facility below was smaller than Riverside's generator room, but more intact. A corridor stretched ahead, lined with doors that stood open like missing teeth. Each room had served a specific military function: communications, radar monitoring, supply storage. All were empty now, stripped of equipment decades ago. "If there was gold here, the Air Force took it when they decommissioned," Sykes said. "I've been through every inch of this place." But Elena had learned to look for inconsistencies. She moved slowly through each room, checking walls and floors for signs of concealment. In the third room, she found it. A ventilation grate set into the floor that was welded shut, its seams filled with concrete. "Mr. Sykes, was this grate welded when you bought the property?" He knelt beside her, examining it. "Never paid attention, just a vent, far as I knew." Daniel was already pulling tools from his pack. "Vents shouldn't be welded shut. That's a safety hazard." It took 30 minutes to cut through the welds. Beneath the grate was a shaft descending another 12 feet to what appeared to be a sub-basement level not shown on any blueprints. "Well, I'll be damned," Sykes muttered. They rigged a rope and descended one by one. The space below was tiny compared to Riverside, just a single room maybe 15 feet square, but it wasn't empty. 4 metal cases sat against one wall, smaller than the crates at the dam, but clearly military issue. Elena photographed them before opening the first one. Gold coins, hundreds of them, each sealed in individual plastic holders. American eagles, Canadian maple leafs, South African krugerrands. The second case held more coins, the third and fourth the same. "How much?" Sykes's voice was rough with emotion. Daniel was using his phone to research values. "Roughly 3 million, give or take. Not bad for 4 cases. 3 million meant 100,000, 0 for Sykes. For a rancher in his 70s, that was a fortune. Elena watched his face transform as the reality sank in. "I walked over this spot 10,000 times, he whispered. "Never knew. They documented everything before calling Agent Dominic. The Treasury team arrived within hours, and the now familiar process began. Verification, documentation, legal paperwork. As they prepared to leave the next day, Sykes stopped Elena at her car. "Thank you for being straight with me, for not trying to cheat an old man." Elena shook his weathered hand. "You took a chance, trusting us. That took courage." "The missile crisis," Sykes said suddenly. "We were so close to the end. You can't imagine unless you lived it. Every day thinking the bombs might fall. The government did things back then. Crazy things. Desperate things. Hiding gold was the least of it." His eyes were distant with memory. "There are more secrets buried out there, Ms. Carter. Things besides gold. Some of them maybe should stay buried." His words haunted Elena as they drove away. The second site was in New Mexico, a former testing range that had been partially returned to the Navajo Nation. This required different permissions, different negotiations. Elena spent 2 weeks meeting with tribal leaders, explaining her mission, promising transparency. "The federal government has taken enough from us," Councilman Joseph Benelli said during one meeting. "Why should we help them find more of what they stole and hid on our land?" Elena had no good answer. She could only offer honesty. Because, if it's there, it belongs to someone. Maybe the government, maybe collectors it was seized from. But it should be found and returned to its rightful place. And your nation would receive compensation. We don't want compensation for helping the same government that tried to destroy our culture. Then, use the finder's fee for cultural preservation, Elena suggested. Language programs, traditional crafts, whatever your community needs. Turn their secret into your opportunity. After 3 weeks of negotiations, she received permission to investigate. The site was remote, requiring a 4-hour drive across desert roads that barely qualified as paths. Daniel drove while Sophie sketched the landscape in her journal, a habit she'd developed since the dam discovery. The testing range buildings were mostly rubble, destroyed during decommissioning. But beneath what had been a control bunker, they found an intact basement level, sealed behind a blast door that took 2 days to cut through. This cache was different. Instead of gold bars or coins, they found artwork. Dozens of paintings in climate-controlled cases, sculptures wrapped in protective materials, artifacts from cultures around the world. A placard in the first case explained, "Items seized during customs investigations, 1990, 60, 1960, Shadem. Classified storage pending ownership resolution." "This isn't treasure," Sophie said, studying a painting that appeared to be a genuine Rembrandt. "This is history." She was right. These weren't just valuable objects. They were cultural artifacts, some of them stolen, some legitimately seized, all of them hidden away and forgotten. The tribal leaders who arrived to inspect the discovery were equally conflicted. "Some of these belong in museums," Councilman Benelli said. "Others belong with the families they were stolen from." The resolution took months. The artwork and artifacts were valued at over $40 million, but their true worth was historical. Several pieces were reunited with families who'd lost them during World War II. Others went to museums. The Navajo Nation received their finder's fee and used it to establish a cultural heritage center. Elena's cut was smaller than expected due to the complicated ownership issues, but she didn't care. Watching an elderly Holocaust survivor reunited with his grandmother's painting, seeing tribal members hold artifacts thought lost forever, those moments were worth more than any amount of money. But the discoveries were taking their toll. Sophie was missing school, falling behind, despite Elena's attempts at road schooling. Daniel was aging before her eyes, the physical demands of breaking into sealed facilities wearing him down. And Elena herself felt stretched thin, torn between the foundation work piling up at home and the addictive pull of the next site, the next mystery. "Mom, can we talk?" Sophie asked one evening in their New Mexico hotel room. Elena closed her laptop, giving her daughter full attention. Of course, baby. What's up? I love this. The traveling, the discoveries, being part of something important. Sophie's voice was careful, measured. But I miss my friends. I miss my room. And I'm worried about you. Worried how? Sophie pulled out her journal, showing Elena sketches from the past months. Herself growing thinner, more tired-looking with each drawing. You're not sleeping. You barely eat. And sometimes, you get this look, like you're somewhere else, even when you're standing right here. Elena stared at the drawings, seeing herself through her daughter's eyes. Sophie was right. Elena is amended wary convicted sen, a distроman. The obsession with finding the next cache, with proving the Riverside discovery wasn't a fluke, had consumed her. I think we need to go home, Sophie said softly. At least for a while. Let you rest. Let me catch up at school. The sites will still be there in a few months. Elena pulled her daughter close, feeling tears burn. When had Sophie become so wise? You're right. We'll finish this site, then we're done for a while. I promise. But promises were easier made than kept. Agent Dominic called the next morning with urgency in her voice. Elena, we have a situation. Site 7 in Ohio, the abandoned steel mill. Satellite imagery shows activity there. Someone's digging. Marcus Webb. We don't know, but whoever it is, they're moving fast. If there's a cache there, they might find it first. You're the closest investigator we have. Elena thought of her promise to Sophie, of going home, of rest. But the thought of Marcus Webb, or someone like him finding and stealing a federal cache, made her blood boil. We're 3 days out, she said. Can you stall them? We don't have jurisdiction to stop them. It's private property, and the owner, a development company, has every right to excavate. Unless you can prove there's a federal cache there first. Elena looked at Sophie, who'd heard every word. Her daughter met her eyes and slowly nodded. One more. Then, home. They drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel. Daniel navigated while Elena dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, dreaming of sealed doors and golden light. Sophie slept in the back, her journal clutched to her chest like a talisman. The steel mill loomed against the Ohio sky, like a monument to industrial decay. Rust had claimed everything, turning the massive structures into orange-brown sculptures of a bygone era. The development company's excavation was already underway, heavy machinery tearing into the foundation of what had been the main processing building. Elena approached the site supervisor, a harried man named Mike Chen, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mr. Chen? I'm Elena Carter, Treasury Department consultant. I need to inspect this site before you continue excavation. Chen barely glanced at her credentials. Lady, I've got deadlines. The whole foundation has to come out before winter, or we lose the construction season. I can't stop for a federal wild goose chase. If you destroy a federal cache, you'll lose more than a construction season. You'll lose your contract and possibly face criminal charges. That got his attention. Chen pulled out his phone, called someone, argued briefly, then hung up with a disgusted look. You've got until p.m. After that, we're back to work whether you're done or not. 5 hours. Elena gathered Daniel and Sophie, spreading out blueprints of the facility. The mill had multiple basement levels for the blast furnaces. If there's a cache here, it'll be in the deepest level, the most protected. They split up, each taking a section of the massive facility. Elena's area was the old ore processing building, its interior a maze of rusted equipment and collapsed catwalks. She moved carefully, testing each step, watching for weak floors and unstable structures. In the northwest corner, she found something unusual, A section of floor that wasn't original construction, newer concrete, patched into the older foundation. She marked it and moved to check the rest of her section. By 3 p.m., they'd identified 3 possible sites. Daniel had found sealed doorways in the blast furnace building. Sophie had discovered a welded hatch in what had been the mill's administrative basement, and Elena had her patched floor. "We don't have time to check all 3, Daniel said. "We need to choose." Elena studied the blueprints again, thinking about the pattern she'd seen at other sites. The caches were always in the most protected, least accessible locations. The blast furnace. Blast furnace. That's the deepest, most reinforced section. They focused their efforts there, and Daniel used his tools to cut through the sealed doors. Behind them, a stairwell descended into absolute darkness, the air stale and cold. Elena led the way, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The chamber at the bottom was different from anything they'd seen before. Instead of crates or cases, they found a single massive vault door built into the rock itself. Military-grade security, with locking mechanisms that looked like they belonged in a nuclear facility. "This is bigger than the others," Daniel said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Whatever's in there, someone went to extreme lengths to protect it." Sophie was photographing everything, documenting as they'd learned to do. "Mum, look at the door. There's writing." Elena moved closer. Etched into the steel was a phrase: Project, Continuity, Level Shadem, Authorization, Required, Continuity of Government. Daniel breathed. This isn't just a gold cache. This was part of the Doomsday Protocols. Elena felt cold, despite the underground warmth. During the Cold War, the government had established secret facilities to ensure the survival of the nation's leadership and critical functions in case of nuclear war. If this was one of those sites. "We need to open it," she said. "Elena, we can't. That level of classification, we could be breaking laws we don't even know exist. Then, we call it in and let the Treasury decide. But we document it first. Prove it's here. Otherwise, Chen's excavators might destroy it tomorrow, and whatever's inside will be lost forever." They spent the next hour photographing every angle of the vault and the chamber. Sophie found more markings, dates, and codes that meant nothing to them but might be critical to experts. At 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before Chen's deadline, they emerged from the facility. Agent Dominic arrived within hours, along with a team that included military personnel and officials Elena didn't recognize. They sealed off the entire steel mill, declaring it a federal site. Chen's development company protested, threatened lawsuits, but the paperwork was ironclad. "What's in there?" Elena asked Dominic, as they watched specialists rappel into the chamber. "I honestly don't know. This level of classification is above my clearance." Dominic looked at Elena with something like awe. "But you found it. 3 major discoveries in 4 months. That's unprecedented." "I just look for what doesn't fit," Elena said. "Walls that shouldn't be there. Floors that don't match. Spaces that don't make sense. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide these things. That effort leaves traces." It took 2 weeks for the vault to be opened. Elena wasn't allowed to be present, but Dominic called her with the results. It wasn't gold, it was documents. Thousands of pages of classified records, backup tapes, microfilm, a complete archive of sensitive government operations from 1960 to 1960. Some of it's being declassified, but most will probably stay secret for decades more. What's it worth? Historically? Priceless. Financially? Dominic paused. The Treasury is authorized to offer you $1 million as a finder's fee for locating a continuity facility. It's complicated because the contents weren't really stolen or lost, just hidden. but you'll get something. 1 million was far less than previous discoveries. But Elena found she didn't care. The document archive wasn't treasure to be sold. It was history, memory, the kind of secrets that shaped nations. Knowing it had been found and preserved felt like enough. "I think we're done," Elena told Dominic. "Sophie needs to go back to school. Daniel needs to rest. And I need to remember what normal life feels like." "I understand. But Elena, there are 13 more sites. Questions waiting to be answered. You're the best chance we have of finding them before they're destroyed or looted. Then train someone else. Teach them what to look for. I've shown it can be done. Now, it's someone else's turn." Elena returned to Pennsylvania with Sophie and Daniel, settling back into the life she'd built. The foundation flourished, her staff having managed brilliantly in her absence. Sophie returned to school and caught up quickly, her experiences giving her perspectives her classmates couldn't match. Daniel moved into a small house near Elena's, becoming a fixture in their lives. The grandfather figure Sophie had never had. His military contacts and her treasure-hunting fame led to consulting work, advising museums and historical societies on locating lost artifacts. But Elena couldn't completely leave the past behind. Late at night, she'd study the reports from the 13 remaining sites, wondering what secrets they held. Maps spread across her dining table, photos and blueprints covering the walls of her study. The addiction to discovery hadn't left. It had just gone into remission. 6 months after returning home, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a facility she didn't recognize, with a handwritten note. "Site 14, Montana. Not on the official list. Come alone." The handwriting was familiar. Marcus Webb. Elena stared at the photo for a long time, anger and curiosity warring in her chest. Webb had vanished after the Riverside Dam incident, his identity revealed as an alias for a man wanted in connection with black market antiquities. The FBI had been searching for him ever since, and now he was reaching out to her. She should call Agent Dominic, turn the photo over to the authorities. That was the smart play, the safe play. But something about the image nagged at her. The facility looked older than the Cold War sites, more primitive in construction. If it wasn't on the official list, that meant it predated the dispersal program. What could be older than that? What secrets had been buried before the nuclear age? Elena made a decision that she knew was probably foolish. She called Daniel. "I need your help with something, and you're absolutely going to tell me I'm crazy." Daniel listened to her explain about the photo, about Webb's note. His response was immediate. "You're absolutely crazy. This is obviously a trap." "Probably. But what if it's not? What if there's something real there? Then let the FBI handle it. They're trained for dangerous situations. And watch them seize whatever's there, classify it, bury it again under government secrecy." "Daniel, if Webb is reaching out, it's because he wants something. Maybe just to talk, maybe to clear his conscience. But I think he knows something the authorities don't." "Elena, I'm going. The only question is whether you're coming with me, or if I'm going alone." Daniel sighed heavily. "Sophie cannot know about this. And we're bringing serious backup. I'm calling some old Marine buddies." 3 days later, Elena and Daniel, accompanied by 2 of Daniel's former unit members, drove into Montana's backcountry. The coordinates from Webb's photo led them to a region marked on maps as federal wilderness. But the facility was there, hidden in a ravine that would be invisible from any road or trail. The structure was ancient by American standards, stone and timber construction that looked more like a 19th century fort than a 20th century bunker. And standing outside the entrance, arms crossed, was Marcus Webb. He looked different from his brief appearance at the dam. Older, worn down, like a man who'd been running for too long. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. Elena kept her distance, Daniel and his friends positioned strategically around her. Why? Why reach out now? Webb's smile was sad. Because I'm dying. Cancer, 6 months at most. And I've spent my life chasing secrets, stealing them, selling them. I thought it made me powerful, made me important. But now, at the end, he shook his head, I just feel empty. And there's one secret I need someone to know about before I'm gone. So, you led Elena into the middle of nowhere as your deathbed confession. Daniel's voice dripped skepticism. I led her here because this is where it all started. The continuity program, the dispersal sites. All of it grew from what's in this facility, and the government doesn't even remember it exists. Elena studied Webb carefully, looking for signs of deception, but all she saw was exhaustion and regret. What's inside? The beginning. Come see. Against every instinct, Elena followed him into the structure. Daniel stayed close, weapon ready. The interior was remarkably preserved, protected by the ravine from weather and decay. They descended stone stairs into chambers carved from living rock, and there, in the deepest chamber, they found it. Not gold or documents or artwork. Bodies. 12 glass-fronted coffins, each containing remarkably preserved remains in military uniforms that predated World War I. Plaques identified them. Soldiers from the Spanish-American War. All died in 1999, all with the same cause of death listed. Experimental casualties. What is this? Elena whispered, horror and fascination mingling. Webb stood before the coffins like a man in church. Chemical weapons testing. Before Hague Conventions, before international law, before anyone cared about such things, these men were test subjects. When they died, the army hid them here, buried the research. Then they forgot, the way institutions forget uncomfortable truths. And you knew about this, how? My grandfather was one of the researchers. He kept notes, felt guilty his whole life. Told my father, who told me. I've been trying to profit from hidden government secrets for years, but this one wouldn't let me go. These men deserve to be acknowledged, to be honored, not left in a forgotten hole. Elena photographed. The chamber, the coffins, the plaques. Each image felt heavy with responsibility. The continuity program. You said this is where it started? Webb nodded. Once you start hiding bodies, hiding shame, it gets easier to hide everything else. Gold, documents, war crimes, all of it goes underground. This chamber is the original sin. The moment the government learned it could make inconvenient truths disappear. Daniel was reading the plaques, his face pale. These men have families, descendants who never knew what happened to them. Exactly, Webb said. And that's why I brought Ms. Carter here. She's proven she can make discoveries public, force transparency. These men deserve sunlight. Finally, Elena looked at Marcus Webb, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a villain or a thief, but a man crushed by the weight of inherited guilt, trying to make amends before death claimed him. Will you turn yourself in? She asked. Face the charges against you? Webb smiled. I'm already facing the final charge, Ms. Carter. Cancer doesn't accept plea bargains. But yes, once you've documented this, I'll contact the FBI. It's time to stop running. They spent hours in the chamber, documenting everything. When they emerged, Webb was as good as his word. He called Agent Dominic himself, gave his location, waited calmly for the agents to arrive. As they took him away, he called back to Elena. There are more secrets, more hidden truths. Keep looking, Miss Carter. Someone has to remember what the world wants to forget. The discovery of the experimental casualties chamber sparked a national conversation about accountability and historical truth. The remains were identified, families notified, and proper military burials arranged. Webb's testimony led to the declassification of numerous other uncomfortable historical events, and Elena finally understood what she'd really been doing all these months. Not treasure hunting, but archaeology of secrets, bringing light to men, deliberately darkened places, giving voice to silenced stories. 3 months later, as she stood at the memorial service for the 12 soldiers, Sophie beside her, Elena made a decision. The foundation would expand its mission, not just medical assistance, but historical recovery, finding the forgotten, honoring the dismissed, bringing truth to light, even when it was uncomfortable. "Mum," Sophie said quietly, "are we going to keep doing this? Finding secrets?" Elena looked at her daughter, seeing wisdom beyond her years, only the ones that need to be found, only the truths that deserve to be told. As they walked away from the memorial, Elena's phone buzzed. Agent Dominic, with coordinates for Site 15. Elena looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Some searches could wait. Some mysteries could take their time. For now, she had enough to remember, enough to honor, enough truth to hold. The condemned dam had given her treasure, yes, but more than that, it had given her purpose. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than all the gold, in all the forgotten vaults, in all the world. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.